It was a quiet evening at Hogwarts, the kind of evening where the castle's ancient walls seemed to settle into a gentle rhythm, and the magic that filled the air felt softer, like a familiar melody lulling the castle to sleep. The soft glow of lanterns flickered along the stone hallways, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. Outside the windows, the evening mist rolled over the grounds, the moon casting a pale light on the gently swaying trees. The world outside was peaceful, but inside, Hogwarts was brimming with untold stories, each corner filled with the soft echoes of memories long past. Tonight, however, there was a new air of mystery, a whisper among the castle's ancient stones, the kind of mystery that had been waiting for just the right moment to be uncovered. For though the castle had lived through centuries of history, there was always more to discover, more that had been tucked away in its vast, forgotten corners. And as Harry Potter wandered the halls late into the night, he couldn't shake the feeling that the castle had something to reveal, something that had been hidden for a very long time. Harry's footsteps echoed softly on the stone floors, the soft creak of the castle's old wood beneath him adding to the peaceful rhythm of the night. He had just finished a long, quiet dinner in the great hall, the flickering candles above casting a warm, golden glow on the stone walls. The hall had been unusually still tonight, and Harry had felt a quiet tug at his heart, a pull toward the unknown, a need to step away from the routine of the day and explore. As he turned a corner in the dimly lit hallway, his eyes caught a small, carved door tucked away in the stone, barely visible unless you knew where to look. It was an unassuming door, no different from the others that lined the castle's vast corridors. But tonight, it stood out to him as though it had been waiting for him to notice. Something about it felt important, though Harry couldn't explain why. He stepped toward it, the old wood creaking under his hand as he turned the knob. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the only light coming from the soft glow of a single lantern resting on a small wooden table. The air felt heavier here, as though the room had been untouched for many years. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with old trunks, books, and mysterious artifacts, some of which Harry couldn't even begin to identify. In the center of the room, however, stood a large, ornate trunk, its wooden surface darkened with age, the intricate carvings on its sides almost hidden beneath layers of dust. The trunk was like something out of an old tale, a relic from a time long past. It seemed to hum with a quiet, mysterious energy, and Harry couldn't help but be drawn to it. It was no ordinary trunk, that much was clear. There was a sense of magic surrounding it, as though it held something precious, something important, something that had been waiting to be discovered. As Harry moved closer, the air in the room seemed to shift. The temperature dropped just slightly, and a faint whisper, like a soft breath, touched the back of his neck. It was almost as though the castle itself was watching him, waiting for him to unlock its secrets. His hand hovered over the latch of the trunk, and for a brief moment, Harry hesitated. It was as if the trunk had been sealed for a reason, as though it had waited patiently for someone to come, someone with the right intentions, someone with the heart to understand its contents. And so, with a steady breath, Harry slowly lifted the latch, feeling the ancient magic stir around him as the lid creaked open. As Harry carefully lifted the lid of the trunk, a soft creak echoed through the quiet room, almost as though the trunk itself was exhaling a long-held breath. For a moment, Harry paused, the faintest shiver running down his spine, as if the very air around him was charged with ancient energy. The trunk had been waiting for him, but for what? And what secrets lay inside? With a final pull, the lid was fully open, and Harry peered inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light of the room. Inside, there were a few things that immediately caught his attention. First, a collection of old parchment scrolls, their edges yellowed with age, stacked neatly at one end. There were also several thick leather-bound books, their spines worn from years of use, their titles faded. But it was the small, intricately carved box near the center of the trunk that intrigued him most. It seemed to pulse with a faint, almost imperceptible light, as if it held something alive within it. Before Harry could reach for the box, a soft voice behind him interrupted his thoughts. "You found it, didn't you?" Harry turned quickly, his heart skipping a beat. There, standing in the doorway, was none other than Ron Weasley, his red hair tousled and his face a little more tired than usual, as though he had just woken up from a nap. But even in the dim light of the room, Harry could see the familiar glint of curiosity and concern in his friend's eyes. Ron had always been there, steadfast and reliable, ever since their first meeting on the Hogwarts Express all those years ago. Even now, after everything they had been through, Harry knew that Ron's presence would always be a source of comfort and strength. His loyalty was unwavering, and his instinct to protect his friends was as strong as ever. "You always find these things," Ron added with a grin, though Harry could see the hesitation behind it. He was obviously curious about the trunk, but there was also a subtle wariness in his gaze. Much as Ron loved a good mystery, he had learned through their many adventures that some things were better left undisturbed. Harry smiled at his friend, relieved to see him. Despite the mystery of the trunk and the questions swirling in his mind, Ron's presence brought a sense of familiarity and ease that Harry hadn't realized he needed. "I didn't mean to wake you," Harry said softly. "I just found this old trunk. It's strange, Ron. Something about it feels different." Ron stepped closer, peering over Harry's shoulder at the contents of the trunk. His eyes widened when they landed on the box. That looks important. What's inside?" "I don't know yet," Harry replied, still hesitant. The box seemed to shimmer faintly under his gaze, and a part of him, some deep, instinctive part, felt that opening it might be a mistake. But the pull to discover its contents was undeniable. "I was just about to open it." Ron hesitated for a moment, clearly torn between curiosity and caution. "Are you sure we should be messing with this, Harry? It doesn't exactly look like something we're supposed to find." "I don't know," Harry admitted, his voice low. "But it feels like it's meant for me. For us, maybe." We've always been the ones to uncover the hidden things, right? Ron smiled faintly at that, his usual bravado returning. Well, if you put it like that, I suppose we don't have much of a choice, do we? Harry chuckled softly. He could always count on Ron to lighten the mood, even in the most mysterious and tense of situations. His friend's loyalty and bravery had been invaluable in every one of their past adventures. Through every challenge, every dangerous situation, Ron had stood by Harry without hesitation, even when the odds seemed impossible. Ron was, and always would be, his closest friend. The boy who had followed him into the unknown time and time again, never once questioning whether or not to be by Harry's side. Even as they grew older and faced the complexities of life beyond Hogwarts, the bond between them remained as strong as ever. "All right," Ron said, a mischievous glint in his eye as he looked at the box. "Let's open it then. What's the worst that could happen?" Harry laughed quietly, though the weight of what lay ahead settled big into his chest. The mystery of the trunk, the box inside, and whatever secrets it held was far from over. There was something important about this discovery, something that had been hidden for a reason. And as much as Harry wanted to push forward and uncover the answers, he couldn't shake the feeling that the castle was watching them, waiting for them to make their move. As Harry reached for the carved box, his hand brushed lightly against the surface of the trunk, and for a moment he felt an odd sensation, a strange, almost electric pulse, as though the trunk itself was alive with magic. The box was delicate, made of polished wood and intricate carvings that seemed to tell a story of their own. Each carving was a faint symbol, some of which Harry recognized, though their meanings were lost to him. He gently lifted the box from the trunk, the weight of it surprisingly light in his hands. As he set it down on the table, the box seemed to hum with a quiet energy. It felt as though the very air around them was holding its breath. "What do you think it is?" Ron asked, his voice low, his eyes fixed on the box. Harry felt a sense of anticipation growing within him, though a quiet part of him wondered if they were making a mistake. This was no ordinary trunk, no ordinary box. The magic surrounding it was old, ancient even, and Harry could sense that whatever lay inside was something far beyond their usual adventures. "I don't know," Harry said, his voice tinged with both excitement and caution. "But I think we're about to find out." With a deep breath, Harry carefully opened the box. As Harry slowly lifted the lid of the carved box, a soft, almost imperceptible hum filled the room. It wasn't a sound that could be heard clearly, but more of a vibration that seemed to resonate through the very air around them. The temperature in the room seemed to shift subtly, growing warmer and lighter as if the box were somehow awakening, responding to the touch of those who dared to open it. Harry's fingers tingled as he gently set the lid aside, his breath catching in his throat. Inside the box was something so simple, yet so deeply magical, that Harry couldn't quite make sense of it at first. Resting within the box was an old parchment, rolled and secured with a piece of delicate twine. It looked ordinary enough at first glance, but there was something different about it, something old, ancient, like it had been waiting for this exact moment to be seen again. Ron, standing beside Harry, leaned in closer, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Is that it?" he asked quietly. "Is that the thing that's been hidden all this time?" "I think so," Harry whispered, his voice almost a reverent murmur. He could feel the pull of the parchment, almost as if it were calling to him. "It's just a piece of parchment, but it feels like it holds something important." The parchment, though worn at the edges and faded in places, had a shimmer to it, a faint glow that seemed to pulse softly with the same rhythm as Harry's heartbeat. It wasn't the kind of glow that could be explained by light or shadow. It was a magical radiance, something beyond the natural world. The sensation in the room deepened, the soft hum now a gentle vibration in the very walls, as though the castle itself were reacting to this discovery. Without saying a word, Harry reached into the box and untied the twine. The parchment unraveled slowly, its edges curling slightly, revealing strange, intricate symbols etched into the paper. At first, Harry couldn't make sense of the markings. They were not like anything he had ever seen before. They weren't in any language he recognized, but there was a power in them, a whisper of old magic that seemed to emanate from the parchment itself. "Look at this," Harry said, his voice filled with wonder as he held the parchment carefully, turning it slightly toward Ron. "It's like a map or a code." Ron bent over to examine it, his face scrunched in concentration. "It doesn't look like any map I've seen before," he said, his fingers lightly brushing the symbols. "These marks, they seem alive." Harry nodded. He could feel it too, the way the parchment seemed to hum, as though the symbols on it were shifting just beneath his fingertips. They weren't static, they were moving, subtly rearranging themselves, as if they were reacting to his touch, to the presence of the two of them in the room. "It's magic," Harry said softly, more to himself than to Ron. "But what kind of magic?" Suddenly, as Harry continued to trace the symbols with his fingers, a soft light flared from the parchment. It wasn't a blinding light, but a gentle glow that filled the room, casting strange shadows on the walls. The symbols on the parchment shifted, moving in a rhythmic dance, as though the parchment itself was alive, guiding Harry and Ron through some ancient process. Then, without warning, the room seemed to change. The stone walls around them rippled as if they were fabric caught in a soft breeze, warping and twisting. Harry blinked, and for a split second, the room disappeared altogether, replaced by a vast, starry sky stretching as far as the eye could see. It was as if they were no longer in the room at all, but floating in the middle of the night sky, suspended between stars that sparkled with a strange magical light. The cool, crisp air around them filled with a deep, unearthly silence, and Harry felt himself holding his breath, unsure of what was happening. "Harry, what's going on?" Ron asked, his voice tight with confusion. He was standing next to Harry, but the air between them felt different now, like they were in a dream, a memory. The room had disappeared, and the weight of the parchment in Harry's hand seemed to grow heavier, its glow brighter. I don't know," Harry whispered, staring around him in awe. This is something else. This isn't just magic. This is ancient magic. The parchment in Harry's hands pulsed once again, and the night sky around them shifted, swirling like water in a basin, until the stars themselves seemed to realign. The stars above them rearranged, and the constellations began to form new patterns, patterns that, strangely, seemed to mirror the symbols on the parchment. It was as if the parchment was guiding them through the stars, revealing a hidden language in the night sky, a code locked within the constellations themselves. Harry's mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. It was no ordinary celestial arrangement. It was as though the night sky itself was a map, one that had been hidden for centuries, waiting for someone to decode its secrets. "The stars," Harry said, his voice filled with awe. "It's like they're showing us something." Ron stepped closer, his eyes wide with amazement. "But what is it? What are they showing us?" Before Harry could answer, the stars began to pulse brighter, faster, and suddenly, in a burst of light, a figure appeared in the sky, a figure cloaked in shadow, standing tall in the center of the constellations. It was as though the figure had been formed from the very stars themselves, its silhouette outlined by the swirling patterns of light. Harry felt his heart skip a beat. The figure seemed familiar, though he couldn't place why. It was as though the figure had always been there, waiting for him to notice. The stars flickered around the figure, casting long, glowing trails of light that stretched across the sky like streams of magic. The figure raised its hand, and Harry felt the pull of it, an irresistible force drawing him toward it, pulling him into the light. He glanced over at Ron, whose face was filled with a mixture of awe and fear. "Harry, I don't know about this." Ron's voice was low, his eyes wide with both excitement and trepidation. But Harry didn't hesitate. Something deep within him told him that this was the key, the answer to everything that had been building. He stepped forward, guided by the figure, drawn by the pulsing light, and as he did, he felt his body shifting, as though he were stepping through time itself, through layers of magic long forgotten. The parchment in his hands glowed brighter, its symbols now a part of the very stars, their meaning unlocking before his eyes. And then, in the stillness of the night sky, the figure spoke. "You have come to find the truth." The figure's voice was soft, like the whisper of the wind, yet clear as crystal. "But know this, Harry Potter, the truth comes with a cost. What you seek is not easily understood, nor easily claimed. The magic you uncover here is not meant to be wielded lightly." Harry swallowed, the weight of the figure's words pressing down on him. He nodded slowly, understanding more than ever that the journey he was on, this journey with the ancient magic, the hidden knowledge, was far from simple. It was a path that would challenge everything he knew, everything he had ever believed, but he was ready. He had to be. "I'm ready," Harry said, his voice steady, though his heart was still racing. The figure gave a slight nod, the glow around it flickering once more, and then, as swiftly as it had appeared, the figure began to fade, dissolving into the stars, leaving only the constellations in its wake. The sky around them shifted again, the stars returning to their normal positions, and the familiar room of the trunk appeared once more, with the soft glow of the lanterns flickering around them. Harry stood still for a moment, the weight of the parchment still in his hands, his mind trying to process everything that had just happened. The vision, the figure, the stars, they had all been so real, so vivid, and yet they felt like a memory of something ancient, something he could barely understand. "Did you see that?" Harry asked, his voice low, filled with awe. Ron nodded slowly, his face pale. "I saw it, Harry. But what was it? What just happened?" Harry paused, staring at the parchment in his hands. The mystery was far from over, but he now felt certain that this was only the beginning of something far greater than he had ever imagined. The answers were out there, and the stars had just shown him the first step. "I think," Harry said softly, "we've only just begun to understand what we've uncovered." The air in the room seemed to thrum with quiet energy as Harry and Ron stood in the wake of the vision they had just experienced. The parchment, still warm in Harry's hands, shimmered faintly, as though it had been touched by the magic they had just witnessed. Harry's thoughts raced, trying to process everything that had just occurred. The stars, the figure, the strange feeling of stepping through time. It had all felt so real, so vivid, as if the very fabric of the universe had opened before them, revealing something deep and hidden. Ron shifted beside him, his voice filled with awe and disbelief. "That was insane, Harry. The stars, the figure, everything was so powerful." Harry nodded, still holding the parchment carefully. The room around them was quiet again, the air thick with the magic that still lingered. The lanterns flickered softly, casting long shadows against the walls of the small, forgotten room. It was as though the castle itself had fallen into a gentle stillness, waiting for them to make sense of what had just happened. "What do you think it all means?" Ron asked, his voice a little shaky, his eyes scanning the room as if expecting something to happen any moment. Harry turned the parchment over in his hands, his fingers lightly tracing the symbols on the paper. The marks that had once seemed like random carvings now felt meaningful, filled with a message, though what that message was, he wasn't sure. The glow from the parchment seemed to pulse with a subtle rhythm, matching the beat of his heart. "I don't know, Ron," Harry said quietly, "but I feel like we've been shown something important, something that's been hidden for a reason. And I don't think we're supposed to understand it all yet." As Harry spoke, the room seemed to shift again. It was subtle at first, like the air around them growing thicker, but it didn't take long for Harry to realize that something was happening. The walls of the room, which had been steady and still, began to ripple like the surface of a pond disturbed by an unseen force. The flickering lanterns cast strange shadows on the walls, which seemed to stretch and twist, growing taller and narrower, as though the very room was bending, reshaping itself. "What's happening?" Ron asked, his voice rising with concern as he took a step back. Harry's hand instinctively reached out for Ron's, pulling his friend closer to him. "I don't know, but we need to stay calm. Whatever this is, it's part of the magic we uncovered." Before they could react further, a soft musical chime rang out from somewhere deep within the room. It wasn't the sound of a bell, but something far more ethereal, like the ringing of chimes made of glass, delicate and resonant. The sound was gentle, almost soothing, but it also carried a sense of urgency, as if it were beckoning them to follow, to listen. The room around them seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as the chimes, and the parchment in Harry's hands began to glow brighter, its symbols shifting once again. This time, however, the symbols began to move in a pattern, like a dance, a slow, mesmerizing swirl that drew Harry's eyes into it, as though the parchment itself were alive with magic. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the room, ruffling Harry's hair and causing the lanterns to flicker wildly. The light from the parchment intensified, casting strange, shimmering patterns across the walls, and in the very center of the room, the air began to shimmer. It was like a mirage, hazy and translucent, but it gradually solidified into something more. A shape, a figure, began to emerge from the air, as though it were being formed from the magic itself. Harry stepped back, his heart pounding in his chest. The figure before them was cloaked in shadow, but its outline shimmered with the same ethereal glow that had surrounded the parchment. As it took shape, Harry's breath caught in his throat. This figure wasn't just a vision, it was real, and it was here, in the room with them. The figure's face was hidden beneath a dark hood, but its presence felt both familiar and alien at the same time. There was a sense of ancient wisdom about it, and yet there was a deep sadness in its form, a weight that seemed to draw the room into a solemn stillness. The chimes rang again, and the figure raised its hand, beckoning Harry and Ron forward. For a moment, neither of them moved. It felt as though time itself had slowed, the air thick with the magic that surrounded them. The figure didn't speak, but its presence was enough to make Harry feel as though it had been waiting for them, just as the trunk and the parchment had. "Do you think we should approach?" Ron whispered, his voice barely audible. Harry didn't answer right away. He could feel the pull of the figure, the strange magnetic force that urged him forward, but there was also a deep hesitation in him. Something about the figure's sadness, its quiet presence, made him wary, but there was no turning back now. The magic had already drawn them in, and this was part of the journey. "I think we have to," Harry said softly, his voice steady despite the uncertainty he felt. "It's part of what we've uncovered. It's calling to us." With a deep breath, Harry stepped forward, and Ron followed closely behind. As they approached the figure, the air around them seemed to hum with energy. The light from the parchment in Harry's hands grew brighter, and the figure's outline seemed to solidify even more, becoming more distinct. When they were standing directly before the figure, it slowly lowered its hood. Harry's heart skipped a beat as the face beneath was revealed. It was an older man with long silver hair that cascaded down his shoulders. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were what struck Harry most. They were deep, ancient, filled with wisdom and sorrow. It was as if this man had lived through centuries of history, bearing the weight of knowledge and secrets that no one else had ever known. "You've come," the figure said, his voice soft and gentle, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. "You've uncovered the path, but it is not one without consequence. The magic you seek is not meant for those who are not prepared to face its truth. Harry's mind raced as he stared at the figure. This wasn't just a ghost, a vision, or an apparition. It was something real, something tied to the very heart of the castle, to the secrets it had been holding for centuries. But what was he supposed to understand from this? What did the figure want them to learn? "What do you mean?" Harry asked, his voice trembling slightly with the weight of the moment. The figure's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, Harry felt as though the figure was looking directly into his soul, seeing every fear, every doubt, and every secret he had ever held. "The trunk you found was not merely a storage chest, Harry Potter. It was a key to unlocking memories long forgotten. You are the one chosen to restore them, but it will not come without sacrifice." Harry felt a chill run down his spine, but he held his ground, determined not to let fear control him. "What do you mean, sacrifice? What is it that we have to do?" The figure stepped closer, his presence filling the room with a deep, resonant power. "The memories you seek are tied to the founders of Hogwarts. They are locked away in the very fabric of this castle, hidden for a reason. You will need to prove yourself worthy to unlock them, to understand the truth they hold. But be warned, the path you are on will challenge everything you believe." Harry nodded, though uncertainty stirred within him. "We'll do whatever it takes," he said, his voice steady, despite the unease settling deep in his chest. The figure's expression softened, a glimmer of something almost like approval in his ancient eyes. "Then step forward, and the next part of your journey will begin." Before Harry could respond, the figure raised his hand again, and in a burst of light, the world around them began to change. The room, the figure, even the parchment in Harry's hands, all seemed to dissolve into light, the air vibrating with magic as the room around them blurred and shifted, as though reality itself was bending to the will of the ancient magic they had uncovered. Harry and Ron were no longer standing in the small, dimly lit room. Instead, they found themselves standing at the edge of a vast, ancient courtyard, the sky above them filled with swirling clouds and the faint glow of magical energy. It was as though they had stepped into a memory, a moment long past, a time when the founders of Hogwarts had walked these very grounds. "Where are we?" Ron whispered, his voice filled with awe and wonder. "We're in the past," Harry said, his voice barely audible. "We're in the memory. This is part of the truth we were meant to find." The courtyard stretched out before Harry and Ron, vast and open, with cobbled pathways winding between lush green gardens. The air was thick with an almost tangible sense of history, as though the very stones beneath their feet whispered secrets of the past. The sky overhead was filled with swirling clouds that rippled like an ocean in motion, casting an ethereal glow across the entire scene. This place, whatever it was, felt ancient, untouched by time, and yet somehow still alive with magic. It was as if they had been transported into a moment frozen in history, a fragment of a long-forgotten memory waiting to be explored. Harry's breath came in soft, steady inhalations as he took in his surroundings. The air smelled faintly of lavender and earth, a scent that reminded him of the hidden gardens around Hogwarts. But this place felt different, bigger, older, more magical. There was a quiet energy here, a sense of purpose that seemed to pulse in time with the very ground they stood on. It was as though they had stepped into something important, something that had been waiting for them for centuries. Ron stood beside him, his expression filled with a mix of awe and confusion. "I've never seen anything like this," he murmured, his voice low. "It's like we've stepped back in time, Harry." "I think we have," Harry replied quietly, his eyes scanning the landscape around them. "But where are we exactly? And what are we supposed to do?" Before Ron could respond, a soft, melodic chime echoed in the distance, as if coming from the heart of the courtyard. The sound was faint but unmistakable, carrying a deep resonance that seemed to vibrate in the very air around them. The chimes were not just a sound, they felt like a signal, a call to something deeper. Harry turned toward the direction of the sound, his heart beginning to race with a mixture of excitement and curiosity. "We should follow it," Harry said, his voice steady despite the flutter of unease in his chest. "I think it's guiding us." Ron gave a hesitant nod, his eyes wide as he glanced around. "You think we're ready for this?" Harry looked back at his best friend and gave a small, reassuring smile. "I don't know what's ahead, but I know we have to see it through. We've come this far. We can't turn back now." With a sense of shared determination, they began to walk toward the source of the chimes, the sound growing clearer as they ventured deeper into the courtyard. The cobbled paths curved gently, leading them through rows of ancient statues, each one etched with markings that Harry couldn't quite decipher. The statues were weathered with age, their faces worn smooth by the passage of time, but their eyes, though faded, seemed to follow them as they walked. There was a strange feeling of being watched, as though the very statues themselves were guardians of this place, keeping an eye on those who dared to step into their domain. The further they walked, the more the atmosphere seemed to shift. The air grew heavier, filled with an almost palpable sense of magic. It wasn't the frantic energy of a duel or the wild magic of an enchantment. It was the quiet hum of ancient power, the kind of magic that could not be rushed, the kind that moved at its own pace, revealing itself only when the time was right. Harry felt it in his bones, the deep connection between this place and the magic he had known throughout his life at Hogwarts. They reached the center of the courtyard, where a large stone fountain stood, its surface worn smooth by centuries of water flowing over it. The chimes were louder now, almost melodic, resonating from within the fountain itself. The stone carvings around the base of the fountain were intricate, depicting scenes of old, figures Harry didn't recognize, their faces shrouded in mystery. The carvings seemed to move, just at the edge of his vision, as though the stone was alive with hidden stories. "It's here," Harry said softly, his voice filled with awe. He could feel the pull of the magic now, stronger than before, a quiet but undeniable force that seemed to draw him toward the fountain. Ron stood next to him, his gaze fixed on the fountain, his eyes narrowing with concentration. "Do you think this is part of the memory?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think so," Harry replied, his hand resting on the stone rim of the fountain. The moment his fingers touched the surface, the chimes stopped abruptly, and a low hum filled the air, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to come from the very ground beneath their feet. The surface of the fountain shimmered, rippling like water disturbed by an unseen hand. The carvings around the base of the fountain glowed faintly, and the air around them seemed to swirl with an ethereal light. Harry stepped back, his heart racing as he watched the fountain shift before his eyes. The stone seemed to melt away, revealing a hidden compartment inside. A soft, glowing light spilled from within, casting long shadows on the ground. This wasn't here before, Ron whispered, his voice filled with wonder and disbelief. What's happening? Before Harry could respond, the glowing light grew brighter, and a figure began to materialize within the fountain. At first, it was a silhouette, faint and shadowed, like a dream on the edge of consciousness. But as the light intensified, the figure took shape, revealing a cloaked figure, its features hidden beneath a dark hood. The figure stood motionless, the soft glow surrounding it like a halo, casting an eerie yet beautiful light across the courtyard. "Who are you?" Harry asked, his voice trembling slightly, though he was determined to remain calm. The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, it raised its hand, and the air around them seemed to crackle with energy. A soft breeze stirred, carrying with it the scent of something ancient, of books long untouched, of magic that had been waiting for centuries to be remembered. The figure's hand gestured toward the glowing compartment in the fountain, and Harry felt a gentle nudge, as if the figure was urging him to approach. "Go ahead, Harry," Ron said quietly, his voice steady but filled with wonder. "It's like it wants us to open it." Harry hesitated for a moment, his mind racing. Everything in him screamed that this was significant, that this moment was part of something larger than himself. But the doubt lingered. This wasn't just some ordinary mystery. It was ancient, tied to the very foundations of Hogwarts. But despite the uncertainty, Harry felt a deep, undeniable pull toward the glowing compartment. Taking a deep breath, Harry reached forward, his fingers brushing the surface of the glowing light. The moment his skin touched it, the light flared, expanding outward in a brilliant burst. For a split second, the courtyard seemed to dissolve around them, replaced by a whirlwind of color and light. Harry blinked, and the world around him shifted. He was no longer standing in the courtyard, but in a vast, open hall, an ancient, grand space that felt both familiar and foreign at the same time. The air was thick with magic here, more intense than he had ever felt before. The walls of the hall were lined with towering bookshelves, each one filled with ancient tomes, scrolls, and objects that pulsed with magic. In the center of the room, a large, ornate mirror stood, its surface reflecting not their faces, but something deeper, memories, fragments of the past. "This is it," Harry whispered, his heart racing as he stepped forward. "This is what we were meant to find." Ron stepped beside him, his eyes wide with awe. "What is this place, Harry? Where are we?" "I don't know," Harry said softly, his voice filled with wonder. but I think this is where the founders left their secrets, and we're here to uncover them. As Harry and Ron stood in the heart of the room, the mirror's surface shimmered once again, and the faintest whisper echoed through the space, like the rustling of leaves or the soft murmur of voices from the past. "Remember," the voice whispered, barely audible, "the truth lies within." The air around them crackled with magic, the atmosphere thick with the unspoken promise of discovery. The large, ornate mirror before them shimmered faintly, its reflective surface not showing the usual image of the two boys, but instead a vast expanse of what appeared to be an ancient chamber. The walls were lined with towering bookshelves, their contents obscured by layers of dust. In the center of the room, glowing with an otherworldly light, stood a pedestal, atop which rested a glowing stone, its pulsating light drawing Harry and Ron in like a magnet. For a moment, they simply stood there, eyes wide, taking in the vastness of the place. It was like nothing Harry had ever seen before, not even in the hidden corners of Hogwarts. The air felt alive with old magic, magic that had been waiting to be rediscovered, to be understood. Everything about this place seemed to whisper, beckon them forward, but the mirror, with its peculiar reflection, seemed to be telling them more than they could understand. "Well, that's certainly not what I expected to find," Ron muttered under his breath, his eyes scanning the room. "I mean, I thought we'd find a chest or something, but this?" Harry was still fixated on the mirror. It had become more than just a mirror. It was as if it was a doorway, a bridge between their world and some deeper, hidden truth. The reflection wasn't a simple copy of the room around them. It seemed to pulse with life, showing moments frozen in time. As he stared, Harry saw fleeting images flicker in the mirror's surface, images of a castle long gone, figures dressed in robes older than any he had ever seen, and symbols that were unfamiliar to him but filled him with an undeniable sense of recognition. "I think we need to step closer," Harry said, his voice quiet but filled with certainty. He felt that the mirror wasn't just showing them something, it was giving them a choice, a path to uncover something that had been lost. Ron hesitated, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "You don't think this is some sort of trap, do you?" Harry shook his head. "I don't think so. It feels right, Ron. This mirror, this room, it's here for us to find it." The air between them seemed to grow heavier with the weight of the decision. They had both grown accustomed to adventure, to exploring the depths of Hogwarts, but this was different. This wasn't a classroom or a forbidden corridor. This was something ancient, something linked to the very foundation of the school itself. "I'll go first," Harry said, stepping toward the mirror. "Stay close, just in case." Ron nodded and followed, albeit more cautiously, as they made their way toward the shimmering reflection. As Harry reached the mirror, the image before him shifted once again. The mirror's surface rippled like water, the momentary stillness giving way to the moving images of the past. He saw the founders, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin, standing together, their faces serious, their eyes filled with determination. They were in a different place, surrounded by swirling lights, symbols carved into the stone, and a table covered in maps and arcane artifacts. The images shifted again, showing the founders in a chamber not unlike the one they stood in now. The room was bathed in light, and they were gathered around something in the center. Harry's heart pounded as he leaned closer, his breath shallow. The stone in the center of the room in the mirror seemed so similar to the glowing stone on the pedestal before them. The founders were looking at it with expressions of awe, but also concern, as if they were aware of the immense power it held. "Ron," Harry whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "They're here. The founders. They were here." Ron, who had been peering over Harry's shoulder at the mirror, stepped back, a look of deep awe on his face. It's incredible. It's like we're looking into the past, like we're actually there." Harry nodded, unable to tear his eyes away from the mirror. "But why are they showing us this? What does it mean?" As if in answer to his unspoken question, the image shifted again. This time, the founders were no longer gathered around the stone. Instead, they were standing at the entrance to a hidden room, behind which could be glimpsed a large wooden door. The door was etched with the same symbols Harry had seen earlier on the parchment, the ones that had glowed faintly when he first opened the box. Ron stepped closer to the mirror, a look of recognition crossing his face. "Those symbols," he murmured. "We've seen them before, haven't we? In the Forbidden Forest, in the ruins." "Yes," Harry interrupted softly, "and on the trunk. It's the same magic, the same ancient spell." The mirror rippled once more, the symbols glowing brighter, and then, just as quickly as it had started, the image in the mirror faded, leaving them staring at their own reflections once again. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy with the realization that they had just glimpsed something far greater than they had expected. But what did it all mean? What were the founders trying to tell them? Harry reached up and wiped his brow, feeling the weight of the moment settle heavily on his shoulders. "Ron," he said softly, "I think we're supposed to find that door, the one the founders were standing in front of." Ron hesitated for a moment, looking at the glowing stone and then at the mirror. His voice was quiet, but filled with determination. "You think it's hidden here, in this room?" "I don't know," Harry replied, glancing around at the towering shelves filled with books, scrolls, and artifacts. "But I think it's our next step. We need to see what's behind that door. If it's connected to the founders, then it's connected to this magic that's been hidden." Ron's gaze flicked nervously around the room. "But how are we supposed to find it? The mirror didn't show us everything. It only gave us a glimpse." Harry's eyes narrowed as he examined the stone pedestal again, his fingers still gripping the parchment. There was a sense of quiet insistence about the stone, as if it were waiting for them to do something, to take some action. He could feel the pull of it, the connection between the stone, the founders, and the secret they were meant to uncover. "I think the stone is part of it," Harry said, stepping toward it. "It's not just a decoration, it's the key." Ron frowned, but followed Harry's lead, walking cautiously toward the pedestal. "The key to what exactly?" "To everything," Harry said, reaching out to touch the stone. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, the air in the room seemed to shift, and the stone began to glow, its light swirling like a soft, gentle current. For a brief second, Harry felt a wave of warmth wash over him, as though the magic had recognized him, as though it had been waiting for him to uncover it. The light from the stone expanded, filling the room with a soft, golden glow. Then, slowly, the stone began to rise, pulling away from the pedestal, as though it were floating on invisible currents of magic. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the air hummed with the quiet sound of ancient power being unleashed. Ron took a step back, his eyes wide with astonishment. "Blimey, Harry, I think it's working." The stone continued to rise, and as it did, a hidden door in the far corner of the room began to shift. The wooden door, covered in the same glowing symbols from the mirror, slowly creaked open, revealing the darkness beyond. "This is it," Harry said, his voice filled with quiet awe. "The door, we found it." Ron looked at him, his face filled with uncertainty, but also the familiar glint of adventure. "After you, mate." With a deep breath, Harry stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the unknown. The darkness beyond the door seemed to pulse with the same magic that had guided them this far, and Harry felt an undeniable sense of purpose filling him as they stepped into the hidden space. The door closed softly behind them, and the room beyond opened up into something far grander than they had expected, a chamber filled with ancient knowledge, secrets waiting to be uncovered, and the magic of the founders that had been locked away for centuries. As the door slowly closed behind them, Harry and Ron found themselves standing in a large, dimly lit chamber. The walls were covered in shelves, some of which contained books and scrolls, others mysterious objects that Harry couldn't quite place. The air was thick with the scent of ancient parchment and dust, a fragrance that only added to the feeling of stepping back in time. This was no ordinary hidden room. This was something much more significant, a place where secrets had been carefully guarded for centuries. The chamber seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction, the stone pillars that held up the ceiling carved with intricate designs, some of which Harry immediately recognized. They were the same symbols from the parchment, from the mirror, from the founders themselves. The magic in the air hummed softly, filling the space with an energy that both comforted and unsettled him. There was something familiar about this place, something that felt as though it had been waiting for him, for them to step inside. Ron, his eyes wide and cautious, stepped into the room beside Harry, his gaze shifting from shelf to shelf, taking in the wealth of knowledge around them. "This is unreal, Harry," Ron whispered. "It's like we've stepped into the Founder's personal library or something." Harry didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on a large, circular pedestal that sat at the far end of the room, bathed in soft, golden light. Atop it rested a large, open book, its pages old and worn, the edges of the paper curled with age. The book, like everything else in the room, seemed to pulse with magic, as though it were alive, waiting for them to come closer. "It's the book," Harry said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "The book they wrote. The founders, they left this for us." Ron's eyes flickered between Harry and the pedestal. "But how do we know it's for us? For all we know, this could be some sort of trap, Part of the mystery we're not supposed to solve. Harry paused, his heart beating faster as he looked back at his friend. I don't think it's a trap, Ron. I think it's a part of the path we've been meant to follow. Every step we've taken, every clue we've uncovered, it's been leading us here. Ron hesitated, his brow furrowing as he looked around the room again. You're sure? Harry didn't hesitate. Yes. He stepped forward, his fingers brushing the edge of the pedestal as he approached the book. The moment his hand made contact with the stone, the room seemed to hum with energy, the very walls vibrating with a subtle pulse. It was as if the chamber itself had recognized his presence, responding to something deep inside of him. Harry's fingers hovered over the pages of the book, and as he began to turn the first page, a rush of images flooded his mind. Visions of the founders standing together, writing, creating, and shaping the very foundation of Hogwarts. He saw the four of them in a room much like this one, their faces filled with concentration, their hands moving as they wrote the very text Harry was now about to read. The images were fleeting, just glimpses of history captured in time, but they were enough to make his heart race with understanding. The book's pages were written in an ancient script, the ink faded and delicate, yet still legible under the right light. Harry could feel the weight of the words as they washed over him. The magic of the founders, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin, was woven into every sentence, every paragraph. The text didn't just contain information, it held the very essence of their power, their vision, and their intentions for the school they had created. Ron, standing beside Harry, had begun to read the passages aloud, his voice soft but filled with awe. This is incredible, Harry. It's like they wrote this for us. For people like us, people who understand the value of magic and what it can do. Harry nodded, his eyes glued to the pages. They knew we'd come. They knew someone would have to finish what they started. As Ron continued to read, Harry's mind raced with the weight of what was unfolding. The text spoke of a time long before Hogwarts had become the great institution it was today. It told of the founders' early struggles to build the school, to protect the magic that lay within its walls, and to safeguard the legacy of their work. But it wasn't just about the school. The book also spoke of a powerful artifact, one that had been hidden in the very foundation of Hogwarts, an artifact capable of amplifying the magic of the founders themselves. A relic, it seemed, that could shape the future of wizardkind. Harry's breath caught in his chest as the truth began to unfold. The artifact wasn't just a magical object, it was a key to unlocking the true potential of the founder's vision. But there was more. The book spoke of a balance that had to be maintained, a delicate equilibrium between magic and those who wielded it. If the balance was disturbed, the magic could spiral out of control. Ron glanced over at Harry, his voice barely a whisper. Do you think this artifact is the thing we've been looking for? Harry nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. I think so, but it's more than just a thing, Ron. It's part of something bigger, a responsibility we can't ignore. He turned another page, his fingers trembling slightly as the next part of the text was revealed. It was a cryptic message, written in a way that seemed almost like a riddle. The words were layered, hidden within the lines of the text, as if the founders had known someone would have to decipher them centuries later. "The key," Harry whispered, his voice barely audible. "The key is not just about finding the artifact. It's about understanding the magic it holds, the power to create and to destroy." The room around them seemed to hum louder, the magic in the air intensifying with every word Harry read. The walls of the chamber shifted, their outlines blurring as though the very room were reacting to the words. Harry's eyes darted from one part of the text to the next, but his mind was already racing ahead, trying to piece together the puzzle. The founders had left this for them, but what did it all mean? What were they supposed to do with the artifact once they found it? Ron, sensing the weight of the moment, glanced around the chamber. "Do you think this is all connected to the prophecy? The one Dumbledore told us about? The one where we're meant to protect the wizarding world?" Harry's mind raced. Could the artifact and the magic of the founders be tied to the prophecy? Could it be the missing piece that they had been searching for all along? The answers felt just out of reach, hidden in the folds of the ancient text, waiting to be discovered. But how? Before Harry could respond, the air around them seemed to shift again. The room grew darker, the light from the glowing stone fading, and a low hum filled the air. It wasn't the same gentle hum they had felt before. This was different. It was deeper, more urgent, like a warning. "Harry," Ron said, his voice filled with concern. "What's happening?" Harry stepped back, his hand still gripping the book as he turned to face the darkening room. The stone pedestal in the center of the chamber began to glow more brightly, casting long shadows on the walls, and the hum grew louder, vibrating in the very air around them. It was as though the chamber itself was reacting to the book, to the words that had been spoken aloud. Suddenly, a loud, booming noise echoed through the room, causing the stone floor beneath their feet to tremble. A cold gust of wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the lanterns and plunging the room into darkness. For a split second, there was silence, the kind of silence that felt heavy, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Then, from the shadows, a figure stepped forward. It was cloaked in darkness, its face hidden, but its presence was unmistakable. It was the figure from the mirror, the same one who had appeared before them in the reflection of the stars. The figure raised its hand, and the chamber seemed to come alive with energy. "You've unlocked the first step," the figure's voice echoed through the room, low and resonant. "But you have yet to understand the true cost of the magic you've awakened." Harry's heart raced as the figure stepped closer, its presence filling the room. The magic in the air felt suffocating now, the weight of the truth pressing down on them. The figure had known they would come, and now the real test had begun. The figure loomed in the darkness, its presence overwhelming the chamber with a quiet, oppressive weight. The air felt thick, the magic so powerful that it was almost suffocating. Harry's heart raced in his chest, his breath shallow as he stood frozen before the cloaked figure. Ron stood beside him, his face pale, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. The room around them seemed to pulse with an energy that wasn't theirs. Something ancient, something waiting for a long moment. The figure said nothing. Its form shifted in the shadows, cloaked in an otherworldly light that seemed to twist and shimmer like smoke caught in the wind. The silence in the room stretched, heavy and full of unspoken meaning, until Harry finally found his voice. "What do you want from us?" Harry asked, his voice steady despite the turbulence swirling within him. He had faced many dangers, but this felt different, darker, more foreboding. It wasn't just about magic or threats. It was about something far deeper, something tied to the very core of Hogwarts itself. The figure tilted its head slightly, its gaze not quite visible beneath the hood, but its voice, calm, yet tinged with a quiet urgency, spoke with the weight of centuries. "You've awakened the magic, the legacy of the founders," it said, its voice like a soft echo in the chamber. "But magic, like all things, requires balance. You have unlocked the door to their secrets, but with it comes the responsibility of knowing the truth." Harry's breath hitched as the words sank in. The truth. What was the truth? What did the founders at Bamagawals that they had hidden for so long? The founders left behind more than just their legacy, Harry Potter, the figure continued. They left a choice that has been passed down through the generations to the ones who would carry their magic forward. You've seen the book, you've heard the call, but now you must decide. Harry looked at Ron, his heart heavy with the weight of the figure's words. The truth, the choices they had made, had all led them here, but what were they supposed to do next? The power of the founders' magic was in their hands, but the cost, what was the cost of this knowledge? "Decide what?" Harry asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. The figure stepped forward, and for the first time, Harry could feel a sense of calm sweeping over him. The overwhelming energy in the room softened, as if the figure was no longer trying to intimidate them, but to offer something deeper. It was as though the very air had changed, the magic shifting from tense and oppressive to something more gentle, like the quiet before dawn. "You have already made the first choice by coming here," the figure replied, its voice now warmer, more reassuring. "You've uncovered the magic, but now you must choose whether to protect it or to release it into the world. The magic of the founders was never meant to be wielded recklessly. It is meant to preserve, to protect, but it can also destroy if misused." Harry felt the weight of the decision settling into his chest. It wasn't just about him, or even about Ron. The founders had built Hogwarts with the intention of protecting magic, of preserving it for future generations. And now, the responsibility had fallen on him, just as the founders had known it would. He couldn't deny it anymore. The choices he made, the path he chose, would shape the future of magic itself. Ron's voice broke through the quiet tension. "So, we're supposed to decide whether to keep it all secret, to hide the truth, or let the world know?" The figure nodded slowly, a faint shimmer of approval in its gaze. "Yes, the choice is yours, Harry Potter, but remember, the truth is never simple, and sometimes the most powerful magic is not the one we wield, but the one we choose not to." Harry stood still, the weight of the figure's words heavy on his heart. He had always known that his life, his journey, was filled with difficult choices. But this was different. The Founder's magic was more than just spells or enchantments. It was a legacy, a force that could change the world if left unchecked. But the calm that had settled over the room, filling him with a deep, quiet understanding, helped him see that this decision wasn't about fear or urgency. It was about responsibility, about understanding that the true power of magic came not from wielding it, but from choosing how and when to use it. He didn't need to rush into the decision, and for the first time in a long while, Harry felt at peace with the uncertainty of the future. "I don't know if we can make this decision alone," Harry said quietly, his voice steady, "but I know one thing. We'll face it together. We've always faced it together, Ron." Ron gave a small, reassuring smile. "Right, together." The figure gave a small nod, its form now glowing with a soft light that seemed to wrap around them both, filling the room with warmth. "Then you have chosen well. The magic will guide you, Harry Potter. The truth will be revealed in time. But know this, the choice you make will echo through the ages, just as the Founder's magic has done." As the figure spoke, the tension in the room began to fade completely, the overwhelming magic giving way to a soft, gentle calm that settled over the chamber like a blanket. The chimes that had once filled the air now sounded like distant bells, their echo soft and sweet, a reminder of the path they had taken and the one they still had ahead. For the first time in what felt like ages, Harry felt the weight of the world lighten, as if the uncertainty he had been carrying for so long was no longer a burden. The choice had been laid before him, but he didn't need to rush to make it. Time would tell what was meant to happen, and he would face whatever came with the same courage he always had. The figure's form began to fade, its presence slowly dissolving into the air, leaving behind only the soft, glowing light that filled the room. As the last of the figure's energy dissipated, Harry felt a deep sense of peace settle in his chest. The chamber around them seemed to hum with magic, but it was a calm, steady hum, one that filled him with warmth and reassurance. "I think we should go," Ron said, his voice low but filled with relief. "We've found what we needed, haven't we?" Harry nodded, his eyes lingering on the glowing stone pedestal before he turned to leave. As they made their way back to the door, the room seemed to fade behind them, the weight of their discovery still with them, but no longer overwhelming. It was as if they had unlocked a piece of the puzzle, a key to something greater, but the answers would come when the time was right. And for now, that was enough. As the door closed softly behind them, the courtyard that had been their guide felt quiet, peaceful once again. The magic still lingered in the air, but it was gentle now, like a lullaby that wrapped the world in a soothing embrace. Harry and Ron stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that they would do it together. The night sky above them seemed to shimmer with the same quiet magic, and Harry couldn't help but feel that, though the journey wasn't over, they had taken the first step toward understanding the truth. For now, the world was still, and that was enough. As Harry and Ron stood together in the stillness of the courtyard, The gentle magic that filled the air seemed to hum softly around them, comforting and peaceful. The moonlight bathed the grounds in a silvery glow, and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze whispered around them as if nature itself were sharing in the calm that had settled after their journey. The world around them felt quieter, softer, as though the weight of the unknown had lifted, just for a moment, but long enough for them to breathe. Harry looked up at the sky, the same stars twinkling above that had guided him through so many challenges. He had felt the burden of the past for so long, the questions, the uncertainty, but now, as the cool night air brushed his face, he felt a strange sense of peace. He still didn't know what the future held or what the Founder's magic truly meant for him and the wizarding world, but for the first time, he didn't feel afraid of it. He didn't feel alone in it. Ron, standing beside him, gave a deep sigh, his shoulders relaxing. You know, Harry, I think we've done all we can for tonight. Maybe it's time to rest. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. Harry nodded, feeling the weight of his friend's words. They had been through so much together, and though the path ahead remained uncertain, one thing was clear: they would face it side by side, just as they always had. He couldn't ask for a better companion. You're right, Ron, Harry said quietly. We've made it this far, and we'll make it through whatever comes next, together. Ron smiled, his usual grin of reassurance spreading across his face. Exactly. No matter what, we're in this together. You're not alone, mate. The night felt still, the gentle magic that surrounded them, wrapping them in a quiet embrace. For all the uncertainty, for all the questions that still lingered, Harry knew that he wasn't alone. The world had always felt like a place of constant challenges, but now he understood that it was also filled with moments of quiet wonder, moments that would give him the strength he needed to face what was to come. As they made their way back toward the castle, the sound of their footsteps was the only noise in the night, and Harry felt a sense of calm wash over him. Whatever mysteries the world still held, whatever truths were yet to be discovered, he knew one thing for sure. He had his friends by his side, and that would always be enough. The magic that filled the air wasn't just about the unknown. It was about the love, the friendship, and the quiet reassurance that no matter what the future held, they would face it with courage, together. With that thought, Harry's heart felt lighter, and he allowed himself a soft, relieved sigh. For now, everything was peaceful, and that was enough.